What if the money stress you carry around all day has almost nothing to do with your actual financial situation? What if you have spent years measuring yourself against a highlight reel, a version of everyone else's life that was never real to begin with? Somewhere along the way, you decided you were behind, but the actual numbers tell a very different story. Today, we are walking through 9 quiet signs that your finances are in far better shape than that voice in your head keeps insisting. See how many are already true for you. Here is the first thing worth sitting with. The feeling of being behind and the fact of being behind are 2 completely different things, and they almost never line up. You can have money in the bank, a steady plan, and real breathing room, and still feel like you are sinking because you keep holding your quiet, boring, functional finances up against the loudest and most polished version of everyone around you. That neighbor with the new truck might be drowning in payments you will never see. The coworker with the constant vacation photos might have a savings account with nothing in it. Meanwhile, the country you actually live in is struggling far more than any of those highlight reels will ever admit. So let us throw the fantasy out and look at the real scoreboard. These are the 9 signs. I want you counting as we go. 1 finger up for every single one that already describes your life. And do not rush to disqualify yourself. Most people, the second they hear a sign like this, immediately hunt for a reason it does not really count for them. Some asterisk, some way they are secretly still failing. Resist that reflex with everything you have. If it is true, even imperfectly, it counts. That habit of talking yourself out of every small win is the exact thing that has kept you feeling behind when the actual evidence has been saying the opposite for years. Number 1, you have any kind of cushion at all. Not 6 months of expenses, not some flawless, fully funded emergency account that a finance guru would slap a gold star on. Just something. A small pile of cash that exists for one job, which is catching you when life swings a bat at your head. If that describes you, even loosely, you are already standing on higher ground than most of the people you walk past every day. And the numbers here are genuinely startling. In Bankrate's 2026 Emergency Savings Report, only about 30% of Americans said they could cover a surprise $1,000 expense straight out of savings. Nearly 1 in 4 had no emergency fund at all. More than half admitted that a single $1,000 bill would send them reaching for a credit card, a loan, or a call to a family member. Sit with how fragile that is for a second. That means the majority of people in this country are 1 blown water heater, 1 emergency room visit, 1 surprise car repair away from a debt spiral they did not choose and cannot easily climb out of. So if your transmission started grinding tomorrow and your very first thought was which account to pull from rather than which card to max out, that instinct is not a small thing. That is close to the whole game. You quietly built a wall between yourself and that chaos, and you did it in an economy that fought you for every single dollar of it. That is not luck, and it is not an accident. That is a habit most people never manage to form in their entire lives. And do not let the experts shame you here either. They will tell you to aim for 3 to 6 months of expenses, and that giant target scares people into doing absolutely nothing at all. But even $500 set aside changes the entire math of a crisis. It is the line between an inconvenience and a catastrophe, between a rough week and a year spent slowly climbing back out of a hole. If you have crossed that line, even barely, you have already done the single hardest part, which is starting when it felt impossible. Number 2, you pay your credit card off in full or close to it most months. There is a name for people like you in the banking world. They call you a transactor, which means you run your spending through the card, collect the points or the cash back, and then wipe the balance clean before interest can dig its claws in. It feels completely unremarkable when you do it. it is anything but. As of the end of 2025, 47% of American cardholders were carrying a balance from month to month, according to Bankrate. For the ones who carry that balance, the average amount owed sits just under $7,000, and the average interest rate on that debt has been hovering around 21%, close to the highest level ever recorded. Run that math, and it turns your stomach. Someone carrying $7,000 at 21% is handing the bank well over $1,000 a year just to stand still, just to keep the balance from growing. That is $1,000 that buys them nothing. Take Franklin, who runs every grocery run and gas fill through one rewards card and pays it down to zero the day the statement posts. He is convinced he is doing the bare minimum. What he is actually doing is borrowing the bank's money for free for 30 days at a stretch, then handing it back before a cent of interest can attach, while the person in line behind him pays that same bank a small fortune for the privilege of falling further behind. If you are on Franklin's side of that line, you are not average. You are quietly winning a game most people never even realize they are losing. And here is the part that makes it even sweeter. Every reward, every point, every dollar of cash back you collect is effectively funded by the mountains of interest that everyone else pours into the system. When you pay in full, you pocket the perks and skip the toll entirely. You are sitting on the profitable side of the whole arrangement, and most of the people on the other side have no earthly idea the game is even being played. Number 3, you put money away every single month, even when the amount feels almost embarrassingly small. $20, $50, whatever slips into savings before you can talk yourself out of it. People love to wave off small, automatic saving as if it barely registers. Here is why it counts more than almost anything else you do. The national personal saving rate in early 2026 sat at only about 4.5% of after-tax income. Read that again. The average American is saving roughly 4.5 cents out of every dollar they bring home, and a huge share are saving nothing at all. Deja works nights at a hospital in Toledo and set up an automatic transfer of $40 every payday. Back before she felt like she could truly afford it, she barely notices it leave anymore. 2 years later, that quiet little transfer has grown into a real number, a cushion that exists entirely because she took the decision out of her own hands and let it run on autopilot in the background of her life. That is the secret nobody frames correctly. The thing that stops most people is not a lack of money. It is the endless waiting for the perfect moment to begin, the someday when things finally feel stable enough to start. A someday that never actually shows up. If you have any version of an automatic transfer running right now, you have already beaten the exact thing that keeps most people stuck at zero for years. And the amount matters far less than the consistency does. $40 a payday does not sound anything like wealth. But wealth was never once built by a single heroic deposit. It was built by ordinary people who simply refused to stop, month after month, year after year, letting time and compounding slowly turn a trickle into something that eventually stands on its own 2 feet. The habit is the real asset. The dollars just quietly follow behind it. Number 4, your credit score is somewhere around 700 or higher, and you might not even know it. So many people avoid checking their score for years because they are quietly bracing for bad news. Then they finally look and find a number that puts them comfortably ahead of most of the country. The average credit score in America right now sits at about 714, and roughly 70% of Americans have a score of 670 or higher, which lenders treat as good. Meredith put off pulling her report for the better part of a decade, absolutely certain it was going to be ugly. When she finally worked up the nerve to look, She was sitting in the low 700s, high enough to qualify for the good rates on almost anything she would ever want to borrow for. Think about what a score in that range actually represents. It means you have been doing the boring, invisible, unglamorous work for years without giving yourself a single ounce of credit for it. Paying bills on time when it would have been easier not to. Keeping your balances low. Leaving old accounts open instead of closing them. None of that feels like a victory in the moment. All of it is the reason a bank will hand you a lower interest rate than it hands the next person in line, and across a mortgage, a car loan, and everything else you borrow in a lifetime. That gap can quietly be worth tens of thousands of dollars that stay in your pocket instead of theirs. And it reaches so much further than just loans. A strong score can lower your car insurance in many states, waive the deposit a utility company would otherwise demand up front, and clear you in seconds when a landlord runs your rental application. It is a silent key that opens doors you never even see being opened, quietly saving you money in a dozen different corners of your life you would never once think to trace back to that one 3-digit number. Number 5, you are putting something toward retirement even if it is nowhere near the maximum. This is the sign people beat themselves up over the hardest, because they read some headline about needing $1 million by a certain age and they spiral into shame. So let us drag this one back down to earth. For 2026, the absolute most you are even allowed to put into a workplace retirement plan is $24,500 a year, and into an individual retirement account, it is $7,500. Almost nobody on earth actually hits those ceilings. The average retirement account balance in the entire country is only about $144,000, and a very large number of people have far, far less than that saved. Terrence puts a modest slice of every paycheck into his workplace plan, just enough to capture the full company match his employer drops on top of it. He is convinced he is hopelessly behind. What he is actually doing is collecting free money that his coworkers are leaving on the table and letting decades of compounding quietly do the heaviest lifting for him while he sleeps. If you are contributing anything at all, and especially if you are grabbing every dollar of an employer match, you are already doing the single most important thing there is, which is simply being in the game early enough for time to work its magic. The person who starts small in their 20s or 30s routinely ends up ahead of the person who starts big far too late. Think about that employer match on its own for a second. When your company drops 50 cents or a full dollar on top of every dollar you put in, that is not a raise and it is not a bonus. That is an instant, guaranteed return you will not find anywhere else in the entire world of investing. Walking past it is the one money mistake on earth with zero upside. If you are grabbing every cent of it, you have already found free money that most of your coworkers leave sitting on the table every single payday. If any of this is landing, if you are quietly counting higher than you expected, do me a favor and subscribe and stick around, because the back half of this list is where the real relief is hiding. Now let us keep going. Number 6, your net worth is a positive number, and it is bigger than it was a year ago. Most people never actually sit down and calculate this one, which is a genuine shame, because the math is simple and the answer is often far kinder than they fear. You add up everything you own, the cash, the retirement accounts, the value of your car, any equity in a home, and then you subtract everything you owe. Whatever is left standing is your net worth. Selena finally did this exercise at her kitchen table one night, fully braced for the number to be depressing. Instead, it came out positive and noticeably higher than the gloomy estimate she had been carrying around in her head for years. For reference, the median net worth for an American household is roughly $193,000, though that figure is dragged way up by the very wealthy at the top. The more honest comparison is by age. Under the age of 35, the median sits around $39,000. From 35 to 44, it climbs to about $135,000. But here is what actually matters, and it is not whether you have hit some magic milestone total, it is the direction you are moving. If your number is positive and it is climbing year over year, even slowly, you are on the exact trajectory that builds real lasting wealth over time. And you are doing it while an enormous share of the country is still stuck completely underwater, owing more than they own, watching their number go the wrong way. So do the exercise, even if the answer scares you. Pull it all together onto one single page and look at it honestly, in the daylight. Most people who finally work up the courage to do it walk away feeling lighter than they sat down, because the monster they built up in their head turns out to be far smaller once it is actually staring back at them on paper. Number 7, you have breathing room at the end of the month. Not a fortune left over, just a little slack. A few dollars that are not already spoken for the instant they hit your account. That slack feels like nothing when you have it. It is actually one of the single clearest signs of real financial health that exists. The Bank of America Institute defines living paycheck to paycheck as spending more than 95% of your income on the pure necessities, the housing, the groceries, the gas, the utilities, with nothing left to work with. By that measure, nearly 1 in 4 American households are running with almost zero margin at all. And by broader self-reported surveys, the share of people who feel that way climbs a great deal higher than that. Byron used to quietly assume that everyone had a small cushion between their income and their bills, until he actually started talking honestly with the people around him and realized how genuinely rare it was. If you can absorb a slightly bigger grocery bill without it blowing up your entire month, if a surprise copay is a mild annoyance rather than a full-blown crisis, then you have margin. And margin is the invisible thing that separates the people who slowly climb from the people who stay trapped, sprinting as hard as they possibly can just to hold their exact same spot on the treadmill. And margin has a quiet way of compounding into something far bigger than itself. A little slack this month becomes a small investment next month, which becomes real options the month after that. It is the very first crack of daylight between merely surviving and actually building, and the moment you have it, almost everything downstream in your life starts to get easier. Number 8, your housing does not eat you alive. The old rule of thumb says your housing should cost you no more than about a third of your take-home pay, and if you are anywhere near or under that line, you are in dramatically better shape than the raw headlines would ever suggest. Here is the backdrop that makes this one land so hard right now. Between housing, healthcare, and childcare, those 3 categories alone now swallow roughly 65% of median household income, up from just over half of it back in 2019. Housing is by far the biggest and most punishing slice of that pie. When your rent or your mortgage stays inside a sane share of what you earn, suddenly everything else in your financial life has room to breathe. Saving becomes possible. Investing becomes realistic. A surprise expense becomes survivable instead of catastrophic. So many people out there are quietly house poor, technically living somewhere impressive, while silently drowning the moment they close the front door behind them. If that is not you, if your 4 walls are not bleeding you dry every month just to keep the keys, then you have protected the one number that shapes almost every other number in your entire budget. That single decision made maybe years ago is doing more heavy lifting for your finances than any clever little money hack ever possibly could. That old one-third guideline exists for a real reason. Lenders built it after watching, for decades, exactly where households tip over from stable into fragile. Stay under that line, and you keep the flexibility to weather almost anything life throws at you. Drift too far past it, and every other part of your budget starts running on fumes, no matter how much money is actually coming in the door. Number 9. Your cash is actually earning something instead of sitting there quietly losing value to inflation. This is the sign that so many otherwise careful, disciplined people miss completely. They do the hard part. They build up real savings through years of effort. And then they leave every dollar of it parked in a standard checking or savings account that pays them almost nothing. The national average on a traditional savings account is somewhere around 0.4%, which is next to insulting. Meanwhile, the best high-yield savings accounts in the summer of 2026 are paying somewhere in the neighborhood of 4%, fully insured by the government, no gimmicks and no catch, on the exact same dollars doing the exact same job. That is roughly 10 times the return for money that is not working any harder. On $10,000 sitting in savings, that is the difference between earning a handful of dollars over a year and earning around $400 without taking on a single sliver of extra risk. If you have already moved your emergency fund and your spare cash into an account like that, and it is quietly earning that kind of yield, you have done something the vast majority of people never get around to doing. And if you have not made that move yet, then let this be the sign you needed, because it is genuinely the easiest, lowest effort financial upgrade available to anyone with even a little cash set aside. And the cost of ignoring this is not neutral, it is a slow bleed. With prices still climbing a few percent a year, money sitting in a near zero account is not standing still. It is quietly shrinking, losing a little of its buying power every single month it stays parked. Moving it is not about chasing some exotic, risky return. It is about flatly refusing to let your own hard-earned savings melt away in the background while you are busy looking the other way. So let us go back to that voice in your head, the one that has been so absolutely certain you are falling behind. Count up how many of these 9 were already true for your life. Maybe you have a cushion, however small it feels. Maybe there is a card you keep paid off, or money quietly moving into savings on autopilot. Perhaps your credit score turned out higher than you feared, or your retirement contributions are compounding away in the background. Your net worth might be positive and rising. There might be breathing room at the end of your month, housing that stays in its lane, or cash that finally earns its keep. You do not need all 9 to be okay. If even a few of those describe your actual life, then the honest, unvarnished truth is that you are not behind at all. You have been quietly building something solid and real, all while telling yourself a story about failure that the numbers flatly refuse to support. The single thing standing between you and the next level up is not more money. It is the stuff nobody ever bothered to teach you. The money lessons that should have been taught in every school and somehow never were. That is exactly where I would point you next, because the moment you can see clearly how the whole system actually works underneath, every single one of these 9 signs gets easier to grow and multiply. But before you go anywhere, I genuinely want to hear from you. Out of these 9 signs, how many were already true for your life? Which one surprised you the most, and which one hit a little too close to home? Drop it down in the comments. Tell me where you honestly are on your own money journey right now, and share the one small habit that quietly changed everything for you. Because someone else scrolling through those comments tonight, fully convinced they are the only ones still struggling, might just read your story and finally let themselves exhale too.